Suho stood in front of the bright digital screen, his eyes reflecting its light as the system's message appeared. The message asked if Guardian Sword was the right name for the new skill he had created. Suho gave a small nod, a smirk on his face, confirming that it was the correct name. The system immediately responded, congratulating him on mastering the skill perfectly. The screen grew brighter as energy swirled around him, surrounding him in a shining display of light and power. A new skill was born, and it was called Guardian Sword Rank S. Suho's expression stayed confident and proud as he looked at the digital screen, which showed the extra benefits of his achievement. His swordsmanship and footwork skills were now 50% better. Then came a surprising bonus. The system also gave him Sword Mastery, ranked S. Sword Mastery was a rare privilege, given only to those who truly understood the blade. It removed any limits on learning or using sword skills, and it made all swords more effective, boosting his techniques by another 50%. Suho thought about this, gripping his sword with pride. In his past life, it had taken him over 10 years to achieve this level of power. But now, with his knowledge, it had come much faster. His worth had grown, and he felt that things were about to get much more exciting. Suddenly, his senses snapped back to the present. A group of terrifying monsters approached him. Their sharp teeth were visible, and drool dripped from their mouths as they drew closer. Suho stared at them calmly, noticing how many there were. He knew the number of monsters for the test was set, and he had already gained everything he wanted. He was ready to leave, but there was only one way out. He tightly gripped his sword, his face showing determination. There were two ways to end the test. He could either be killed by the monsters, or find another way. To Suho, the choice was obvious. A grin spread across his face as he looked at the monsters, deciding he would defeat them all. Outside, a group of people had gathered around a screen connected to Suho's pod. The screen flashed a new message, catching everyone's attention. It said that all the monsters for the test had been eliminated and that the program should be restarted. The room went quiet for a moment. Then, people began murmuring in surprise. One person couldn't believe what had just happened. Another nodded, amazed, saying that this was the first time in history that something like this had occurred during a practical test. Someone else praised Suho for healing the patient. An examiner sighed, saying there was no point in looking at the rankings for this test anymore. A few days later, at Hexagon Guild headquarters, a different scene was unfolding. Inside the headquarters, a group of people sat in a meeting room, looking very confident. One of them confidently stated that their candidate would be the top student this year. Someone else agreed, excitedly talking about all the effort that had gone into raising Ki-hyun, the candidate, and confidently said that this year, it would be Hexagon, not Prime, that would take the top spot. Suddenly, a projector screen turned on, displaying a congratulatory message from the South Korean Hunter Association. The message showed the top candidates, and Suho's name appeared proudly at the top of the list. The names of other candidates followed, but Ki-hyun's name wasn't there. Confusion spread in the room. One person exclaimed in shock, asking who Suho was, while another murmured in panic, wondering where Ki-hyun was. One person, holding a phone, stared at the screen as a call came in. The caller ID showed the guildmaster's name, and they panicked, worried the guildmaster was calling. Meanwhile, in a car, Suho's phone buzzed, and Chulman's voice came through, warm and friendly. Chulman apologized for not congratulating Suho immediately after the announcement, explaining that he had been busy. Suho's smile grew wider as he listened, feeling genuinely appreciative. He thanked Chulman, saying his success was all thanks to him. Chulman chuckled, clearly proud, and pointed out that Suho hadn't just passed, he had scored the highest. He also mentioned that because of Suho, many cheaters involved in skill doping had been caught, which would lead to stronger testing rules in the future. Suho agreed, saying that tests should always be fair. Chulman then paused for a moment, sounding thoughtful, and asked if Suho was still interested in joining the Korean Hunter Association. Suho's expression became serious as he replied that, while he might stay in the guild for a while, his goal remained the same. He would join the Great Hunter Association no matter what. Chulman thanked him, sounding relieved, and promised he would contact Suho as soon as the test schedule or recruitment information was available. Suho agreed and then mentioned it was lunchtime, asking Chulman to make sure he ate well, even though he was busy. Chulman laughed warmly, wishing Suho the same. After the call ended, Suho held his phone for a moment, a concerned look on his face. He wondered aloud if Chulman was okay, since his voice had sounded a little hoarse. Suho then shifted his thoughts, expecting another call soon. Just then, his phone screen lit up with an incoming call. Suho's eyes sharpened, and he prepared to answer, muttering to himself that it was as he had expected before picking up the phone. It was Director Kim Sui, who congratulated Suho on his success. She told him that the payment had been made as per the contract and then asked if Suho was interested in joining the Nexus Guild, promising that he would receive better treatment there than any other guild. Suho's response was polite but cautious, asking how much Director Kim was willing to offer with her proposal. Director Kim's voice stayed enthusiastic as she assured him that she would do her best to meet his expectations. She mentioned that, as an academy scholarship student who graduated at the top, adjusting the terms would be easy. She then suggested they meet in person to discuss things further. Suho thanked her for the offer but explained that he had personal plans for the day. He promised to check his schedule and get back to her, adding that, as a Nexus scholarship student, joining Nexus would look better for him than joining another guild. Director Kim's excitement came through even over the phone as she agreed, urging him not to sign any contract with another guild in the meantime, and promised to fit her schedule around his. Suho chuckled softly, assuring her he would see her soon. After hanging up, Suho smiled to himself, amused by her excitement, still able to hear her enthusiasm in the phone call. The taxi slowed down and stopped. The driver informed Suho that they had arrived. Suho nodded and thanked him before stepping out of the car. He looked ahead at the old market in front of him, determination clear in his eyes. He thought back to everything he had accomplished so far: passing the test, getting his license, and receiving the deposit. The street was busy, filled with people going about their day. Suho took a deep breath, his gaze firm as he focused on what was left to do. It was time to start farming. This was Lighthouse General Market. Some time passed, and Suho reminded himself that he had already bought everything he needed for his new life as a hunter. Now, all that was left was to find a weapon. He entered a small, slightly run-down shop filled with various weapons. Suho approached the counter where the shopkeeper stood. He greeted the shopkeeper, already scanning the collection of weapons. The shopkeeper looked at him curiously and asked what he was looking for. With a polite smile, Suho explained that he had just become a hunter and was looking for a lightweight weapon he could use. He knew this would be tricky, finding something good without a lot of money. He had to be careful. The shopkeeper thought for a moment before pointing toward a section at the back, saying that the items there were a bit cheaper. Suho nodded gratefully, thanking him, and walked toward the shelves, which looked like they hadn't been touched in years. Dust covered most of the weapons, making them seem forgotten. He ran his fingers over one particularly dusty blade, amused by how much dust had collected on it. He carefully examined each weapon, noticing how many of the low-grade weapons lacked verified information. It seemed as if their true value had yet to be discovered. But Suho knew that even unverified weapons might have hidden potential. Holding a spear carefully, Suho thought to himself that some weapons needed to go through a process of liberation before they could truly become powerful. Such weapons usually emitted an aura that seemed to ask for recognition. He believed that not many players would notice such a weapon in a place like this. He could sense something special about the spear he was holding. Slowly, he closed his eyes and focused. A notification appeared, and he felt a subtle tingling of energy. The system announced that magic detection had been activated. Suho smiled faintly, sensing the swirling blue energy around the spear. He thought to himself that he had found it. The scene around him shifted. Now, Suho stood alone in a sunny park, surrounded by green trees. The spear rested in his hand, and he looked at it with a mix of confidence and anticipation. If the shopkeeper knew what he had just sold, he would certainly regret it one day. Suho imagined the man lamenting over his decision to let the spear go for so little. But that was a thought for another time. Right now, Suho had work to do. With a light grip on the spear, he told himself it was time to begin. He took a deep breath, and the calm, peaceful atmosphere around him grew tense. The energy around him started to gather, drawn to the spear, creating a powerful aura around both the spear and Suho. The system's voice echoed in his mind, saying that magical power was being supplied. The consciousness of the weapon began to awaken, and Suho could feel it. The surge of energy caught him by surprise, causing his eyes to widen. He grunted in pain as he felt the pressure. The spear was alive with energy, pulsating and drawing more and more of Suho's magic power. He struggled to hold on to it, realizing in alarm that it was absorbing far more energy than he had expected. Suho thought about how quickly the spear was draining his magic power, panic setting in as he felt his strength slipping away. The power of the spear surged dramatically, nearly overwhelming him. In desperation, Suho released his grip. The spear clattered to the ground, and he collapsed, breathless and exhausted. He thought to himself that if he had been even a little slower, he might have fainted from losing all his magic power. His gaze shifted to the spear, now lying on the ground, its energy dormant again. He sat up, reflecting on what had just happened. He figured that to fully awaken the spear, his magic stat would need to be at least 100. He let out a small sigh, already thinking about his next move. Even though he couldn't use the spear right now, it would be incredibly useful in the future. He smiled slightly, determination in his eyes, silently promising to level up quickly and wake the spear. Meanwhile, under a bright sky, a tall building with a prominent PBS sign stood. Inside, Zhou Jinhui sat at a cluttered desk, focused on his laptop. His routine was interrupted by the sudden ringing of his phone. Jinhui answered, sounding only mildly curious. The voice on the other end spoke with familiarity, introducing himself as Suho, and confirming that Jinhui was the reporter from PBS. Jinhui blinked in surprise, pausing for a moment as he tried to place the name. He asked who Suho was, repeating the name to himself. Suddenly, realization struck him. He was speaking to the top candidate, Suho. Suho confirmed calmly that he was indeed Suho, adding that he was also the solo raider of the unprecedented gate that had recently appeared at Syndrome Station. Jinhui's eyes widened in shock as he realized Suho was talking about the Syndrome incident. He leaned back in his chair, trying to process what he had just heard. His thoughts raced as he considered the possibility that Suho had cleared the unprecedented gate even before obtaining his hunter license. Jinhui marveled at the idea, wondering just how much of a monster Suho must be. Clearing his throat, he asked, "Why specifically contact me?" Suho explained confidently that he had come across Jinhui's blog during his search. He mentioned that Jinhui was known as a Golden Spoon Kid but had chosen to work as a journalist, which, in his eyes, suggested a strong sense of professional pride. Suho then added that he had many plans moving forward and a lot of newsworthy material to share. He proposed that Jinhui become his exclusive reporter, though Jinhui's skeptical expression was clear even over the phone. Jinhui asked dryly, "You want to keep a rich reporter as your subordinate?" He paused, thinking as he assessed the man on the other end of the line. He considered that Suho might just be some odd guy who thought he was special. He replied that while he understood Suho's point, this kind of approach didn't sit well with him. Even though Jinhui was a reporter eager for good scoops, he had no intention of being anyone's subordinate. He stressed that what he wanted was a great partner, not a one-sided arrangement. He also clarified that he was mentioning this because it seemed like Suho was trying to boost his worth before joining a guild. Suho let out a short laugh and admitted that Jinhui wasn't entirely wrong. However, he explained that his aim wasn't to raise his worth, but rather to gain some fame. He also mentioned that he was thinking about joining the Hunter Association as a civil servant. Jinhui paused, his fingers freezing on his keyboard. "Wait, you're talking about the Korean Hunter Association?" he asked, clearly confused. He pointed out that gaining fame through publicity seemed more like something someone wanting to join a big guild would do, not a public servant hunter. He wondered if Suho was joking. Suho reassured him that he wasn't joking. His voice turned more resolute as he stated that he truly intended to join the Hunter Association and work in the field. Jinhui's skepticism only grew. He asked, "Are you one of those people with well-off parents who treat work like a hobby and go after prestige?" Suho's tone became more serious. He revealed that he was what people called a gate orphan, and that was why he was interested in public service. Conquering gates, he explained, was his ultimate goal in life. Jin Hui blinked, surprised by the revelation. His thoughts were muddled. He wondered if Suho was being serious or if he was just another eccentric with wild ideas. After a moment, Jin Hui sighed. He understood Suho's point, but he still wasn't interested in being his exclusive reporter. "I'll write the articles I want to write," Jin Hui said, emphasizing his independence. Suho quickly responded, proposing a bet. He explained that he felt he needed to earn Jin Hui's trust to win his partnership. As a hunter, he suggested proving himself through his skills. He added that he was planning to conquer the Tower of Challenge alone that very day. Jin Hui's eyes widened in disbelief. "Wait, are you really planning to clear the Tower of Challenge?" he asked, the shock clear in his voice. The Tower of Challenge was known as impossible to clear, even with a team, yet Suho was saying he intended to do it alone. Suho's confidence didn't waver. "Yes, I'll do it," he confirmed. "If I succeed, you'll agree to become my exclusive reporter." Jin Hui stared at his phone, caught between disbelief and curiosity. Suho was certainly an odd person, but there was something about his determination that made it hard to dismiss him entirely. Jin Hui stared at his phone, caught between disbelief and curiosity. And Suho was certainly an odd character, but there was something about his determination that was hard to ignore. Suho, on the other hand, thought about Jin Hui, recalling his reputation as a top broadcaster and a reporter for PBS. He knew that Jin Hui's pride was immense, and that his family had plenty of money. Jin Hui was famous for never accepting requests, always sticking to his own standards. Suho also remembered that, in his previous life, he had collaborated with Jin Hui several times. Jin Hui's exceptional reporting skills and his remarkable ability to shape public opinion were well known. However, his overwhelming talent eventually led to him being cast aside. He disappeared from the scene, pushed out by factional conflicts in the industry. In any group, a sharp thorn was often seen as a threat, and Jin Hui was that thorn. His forceful personality had made him a target, causing him to retire earlier than expected. Suho was determined not to let Jin Hui disappear like that again. If he succeeded in conquering the Tower of Challenge alone, Suho felt that he should earn Jin Hui's trust and win him over as his exclusive and personal reporter. Jin Hui appeared shocked, but Suho could tell that he was considering the offer. He emphasized that having a close reporter would be beneficial for both of them. After a moment of silence, Jin Hui sighed and reluctantly agreed. "If you manage to conquer the Tower of Challenge alone, I'll do everything I can as a reporter to help you." Suho smiled confidently, standing in front of the tower, feeling optimistic. He thanked Jin Hui, telling him they would meet later and ending the call. With determination in his eyes, Suho took a deep breath, ready to begin. Meanwhile, in his office, Jin Hui sat alone, frustration bubbling up inside him. He muttered to himself about how annoying Suho was and how the man really got under his skin. Sitting at his desk, he thought over Suho's sudden and bold proposition. He wondered why Suho had made such an outrageous offer. Despite his annoyance, Jin Hui couldn't deny that there was something intriguing about the situation. He stared at his phone, the reflective screen mirroring his conflicted expression. He began to contemplate the sincerity in Suho's words. It didn't sound like a lie, and he didn't believe Suho was a scammer. After a long pause, Jin Hui leaned back in his chair, his mind swirling with thoughts. He felt like he was on the verge of losing control. With an exasperated sigh, he acknowledged to himself that this whole situation was starting to drive him crazy. After another moment, he sat up, looking resigned. He told himself that, no matter what happened, it didn't matter. If Suho's claims are true, then that's great, Jin Hui mused. If not, then so be it. There's no real downside to this gamble. Resolute, he stood up and walked towards the door. He decided he would see where this gamble led him. Meanwhile, at the Tower of Challenge, the area was bustling with people eager to take on its challenges. Suho stood before the tower, speaking with someone as he observed the crowd. He asked the guard at the entrance if he could enter now, showing his ID card. The guard confirmed that Suho could enter, but hesitated before asking, "Are you alone?" Suho nodded and explained that he intended to attempt the challenge solo. The guard looked at him with some doubt and caution. "It's not impossible," the guard said slowly, "but it's unusual for someone who has just passed the hunter exam to take on the tower alone. Even the lower levels can be dangerous. It might be better to form a party." Suho simply smiled and reassured the guard that he was fine and preferred to be alone. The guard, though still worried, relented and allowed him to proceed. He informed Suho of the entry fee and told him to pay once he received the invoice. Suho nodded, thanking the guard, and promised to be careful. He acknowledged the warning to return if things became impossible. As he entered the tower, he thought about the purpose of the Tower of Challenge, which was also known as the hunting ground. This public gate, managed by the country, was designed to allow players below level 20 to challenge themselves and improve their skills. Suho was ready to face whatever lay ahead. He placed his hands on the large door, feeling determined. With his level reset, he knew there was no better place to test himself. He pushed the door open with resolve, revealing a bright light inside. The air grew tense with anticipation. The system's voice echoed in his mind, confirming that he had entered the Tower of Challenge. It reminded him that he could forfeit at any time and that if he declared his withdrawal, he would be immediately transported back to the entrance. Suho summoned his sword, focusing on the task ahead. The system announced that the first floor challenge had begun. A large green slime monster appeared before him, and Suho let out a deep sigh. He quickly readied himself to face the approaching slime. While the sight of it had been intimidating when he first entered the tower, he now assessed the situation with experience. The slime was a low-level creature, and its damage was minimal at Suho's level. However, he knew that if he allowed it to get too close or caught up in its antics, it could become troublesome. With swift determination, Suho charged at the slime. He had a plan in mind. The quickest way to deal with it was to destroy its core. He lunged forward and, with a decisive strike, shattered the slime's core. The creature collapsed, but Suho knew this wasn't the end. From the slime's remains, smaller slimes began to emerge. Suho observed them with a hint of annoyance. The core had split and regenerated into multiple smaller creatures. While they were weaker due to the division, their regenerative ability was what made party play a common recommendation for the Tower of Challenge. Suho, however, didn't hesitate. He knew this was just the beginning. He rushed forward, his sword slicing through the air as he took on the smaller slimes. Dodging their attacks with quick footwork, Suho unleashed a flurry of strikes. He skillfully maneuvered, leaping into the air to avoid incoming tentacle strikes and land powerful blows. His movements were fluid, each swing of his sword precise and calculated. The slimes retaliated, their massive tentacles lashing out toward him. Suho ducked and dodged with remarkable agility, finding the perfect moments to strike. His determination never wavered as he continued to dismantle the creatures, cutting through them with expert precision. At one point, he evaded an attack and leapt onto a tentacle, gripping it tightly. He held firm as the beast swung wildly, using the leverage to his advantage. Hanging in the air, Suho showed no fear or hesitation. Calmly, he swung his sword, cutting through the slimes with a final, decisive series of strikes. With the last of the slimes defeated, Suho looked up at the towering structure above him. There were still 48 floors left to conquer, and he knew there was no time to rest. With his sword in hand and his resolve stronger than ever, Suho steeled himself for the next challenge. A blue system notification appeared in front of him, announcing that the second floor challenge had begun.